Welcome to Making IT Work, Deep Creek Center's blog for IT professionals committed to using best practices to provide exceptional value for their business clients.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to continue our conversation about customer journeys, moving to the next of the stepping stones, offering. The previous ones have focused on exploration, really looking at how customers explore for potential solution providers and how service providers in turn explore for customers, and then the initial stages of engagement, working together to build trust, to be able to do effective communication of the customer's needs and the service provider's capabilities, and to be able to come up with some idea that there may be mutual capabilities that we might want to work together on to be able to solve some type of problem. Now we're moving into the offer stage, where we as a service provider, based on the needs coming from the customer, might put in front of them a particular offer of a set of services or capabilities that we might bring to bear in order to meet their goals and needs. So as we start looking at the different aspects of putting together an offer, you can begin in the context of thinking about demand shaping. Now, many people mistakenly think about demand shaping in the context of trying to influence customer behavior. And more importantly, it's really about understanding customer needs well enough to be able to understand the different aspects of it and how we as a service provider might put together various types of service offerings at perhaps different levels of capability to meet different sets of customer needs. Regardless, when we think about any type of service, we want to be able to think first and foremost about how exactly it enables the customer to facilitate an outcome that they want and to be able to have the experience that they desire as they are carrying out and meeting their objectives. On the way, they're going to want to be able to effectively optimize their level of risk, as will the service provider, and to be able to ensure compliance and conformance with any policies or regulations that are going to govern how we use the service for value. Eventually, from the customer's perspective, they are interested in optimizing the use of their resources and minimizing their costs, and we as a service provider want to do the same. We want to manage this with the optimal set of resources that we need and minimize our costs of provisioning the service. So as we start looking at ways that we can put together potential solutions for different customers, we begin by looking at their relative patterns of business activity. What are the phases of their demand and their utilization patterns? What is the level of capacity that's going to be needed in order to be able to meet those demands? And so eventually it becomes a question of understanding the needs for the capacity and then ultimately provisioning a sufficient level of supply to be able to meet the demand. Over time, there might be some opportunities we can bring to bear to have some influence over certain aspects of the demand, perhaps by providing certain incentives for people to use the service in particular ways. As we start looking at potential solution provisioning, one of the things that we'll want to consider is, can we make legitimate business cases on both sides for how and why we should provision a service and how and why they should consume it? From the customer's perspective, the business case might include the desired value for the key stakeholders in question, the outcomes that the organization wants to achieve, and ultimately the costs and risks that will be effectively managed and minimized as a result of effectively carrying out and using the service to provision and deliver the value. Likewise, as a service provider, we have to make a case for ourselves to enter certain markets and gain the willingness to actually provision certain types of services. This encompasses our own cost-value balance and being able to look at this across all four dimensions. What are the implications for things around our people and organizations? Or do we have the technology and information flows we need to carry this out? What are the implications for suppliers and partners? And what is the nature of the value streams and processes we will require in order to be able to carry out and deliver on this service? So then we can start getting into the finer points of trying to understand the customer and their requirements for the service. Again, we can think about this in the context of the utility. What does the service functionally need to be able to do? And in terms of things like warranty. And this gets into questions of availability, capacity, security, continuity requirements. How do we ensure that we would provision a sufficiency of the service to optimize the cost-value balance for both sides? This encompasses us starting to get a little bit hands dirty into the various roles and responsibilities. How exactly would a customer use this service? Who would carry out which work and which workflows, and how does this help actually facilitate the outcome for the customer? We want to be able to do our best job to try to identify those requirements, and then as we continue to work through the provisioning of an offer to the customer, we may in fact need to manage and evolve these as we learn more about the potential solution and about the customer's changing needs as we work through time. One helpful technique we can use is to help the customer think in terms of the problem that they're trying to solve, as opposed to trying to specify a particular solution. So instead of telling me what you want, tell me what you're trying to accomplish. Tell me what the outcomes and goals are, and then we can propose potential solutions that are going to help facilitate those outcomes for you. The concept of a minimum viable product becomes pretty important here, because in truth, customer requirements are never fully achieved. They're never even really fully understood. So we want to be able to identify and optimize the highest value aspects of a particular solution for a customer. And we want to be able to provision those capabilities as early as possible so that the customer can start to extract value from the solution. And so we as a service provider can start generating feedback on additional capabilities that might produce high value for the customer in the future. Over time, this might help us evolve the service in a way that helps our people focus on the high value things all the time. Likewise, we want to be able to capture these requirements using techniques like user stories. Stories, if you've ever worked with them in an agile practice, help us convert our thinking from what the system is that we might be trying to build to focusing on what the use is and what the customer value proposition and desired outcome is. By taking these stories and connecting them together using techniques like story mapping, we can start to get a meaningful understanding of how people will use the service and what the desired outcomes need to look like. And ultimately, this creates some workflows for us to be able to facilitate an effective customer journey in how they use the service. We might want to be able to establish a finite number of different personas, fictitious takes on a representative set of users and how they would plan to use the service in order to be able to carry out their work and achieve desired outcomes. When you're writing these types of stories, the acronym INVEST becomes very useful. We want to make sure the stories are as independently written from one another as possible, that they are negotiable with the customer and ultimately may reflect changes as everybody learns more about the solution, that they are written to be valuable for real end users, that they can be estimated effectively by the people carrying out the work, that they're sufficiently small enough that people can actually complete them in an iteration of work, and that we can effectively test and validate whether or not the solution actually meets those goals by having appropriate objective criteria. We can then use techniques like Moscow to be able to prioritize the value of these stories. Moscow is a short acronym standing for must have, should have, could have, won't have. I strongly encourage people to reserve must-have requirements for things that are literally, truly must-have. Someone is going to get a large fine or go to jail if we don't have this requirement. And so this helps customers get past the idea that everything is a must-have very quickly and gets them to the point where certain things are truly must-have. These are things I have to have in order to be able to make the solution make sense. Should-haves, a solution should have it. But we might get to a situation, for example, where we don't need 100% of the should-haves before we have enough service to be able to meet minimum viable product and to be able to begin to extract value. Could have, solution might have it, and these might even be very compelling, highly differentiable value capabilities. And in certain circumstances, if a particular could have creates very powerful differentiated value, the customer may choose to prioritize some of the could haves over some of the should haves. And then won't have is for now. I won't have it in this particular iteration of a solution, but nothing in this world is forever. And so as customer requirements change, as their priorities change, some of those may ultimately get renewed as well. If I'm trying then to figure out relative to the particular capabilities which ones might go first, I could use techniques like weighted shortest job first to say, relative to these other things, this is my cost of delay, this is the ultimate level of value associated with this particular capability, and use that to weight in which of these might go first and which of them might be delayed until a later time.
Thank you for joining us today. Deep Creek Center provides consulting and training for businesses around the world. For more information, visit deepcreekcenter.com.